Episode 4 came out of the Ahsoka show, and people were pretty hyped about it. I've seen people like Star Wars Theory posting about Dave Filoni being the savior and 10 out of 10 and that kind of stuff. It was definitely the best episode of the season. It had the best action so far. And unfortunately, I think what made it the best episode was there was hardly any dialogue that needed to be spoken. There was a lot of just fighting and kind of going from place to place, a little bit, a lot of action. Not really too much to get from it other than they clearly put some work into the choreography here, which is, finally. So there'll be spoilers. I'm going to talk about the episode, just quickly what happened, because story-wise, there really isn't much to talk about. So we start off, their ship's messed up. Hugh Wang's trying to fix it. Ahsoka says focus on the transmitter so we can get a signal out for help. And then they say essentially the base of the bad guys is nearby. They can go try to destroy the orb themselves and not give them a path to find Thrawn. Shin comes and tells Baylan that they found him. It looks like one of those robots was kind of sneaking around and scouted them out. And Baylan is clearly the best part of the show for the bad guys, definitely, and probably overall. It's like him and Chopper who have the only personality or charisma, which is unfortunate. So he says, go get them. So they go attack the ship. Hugh Wang ends up knocking out the power on the ship, and then that alerts Ahsoka and Sabine that they're being attacked. I don't know why Ahsoka can't sense them around her. They don't say anything about it, they just kind of don't. So they get into this little tussle with essentially the minions of the bad guys. And Ahsoka has a pretty cool move here where she uses the Force to drag someone else in front of one of the other guys shooting at her. So he shoots him in the back. Sabine gets to use her little Mandalorian gear. She uses her grapples and her armor and all that stuff, which is good to finally see them actually use all the tools that they have available. Because usually it feels like Force users in Star Wars just don't use the Force, and it's really frustrating to watch. It's nice to see Sabine using all her little Mandalorian knickknacks this episode and not just shooting blasters or wielding a lightsaber, which I'm still not quite clear on why she can fight with a lightsaber well enough to defend against a Force user, which you'll also see later in this episode. So I'll try to show you that one little sequence real quick. Hopefully I don't get hit with the copyright. I can just leave it in. So, like I said, nice to see them using all their tools and not just lightsabers or just blasters. Also, we find out during this time that Hera is bringing her son Jace. She's essentially ignoring orders and saying, hey, we're going to go help him. I'm a general. I'm going to do what I want. At this point, I have no clue how the hierarchy in Star Wars works. It's just kind of whatever they feel like doing. And one issue that I still had with this episode was the episode was only half an hour, something like that. 35 minutes, whatever, without credits and all that, is they still managed to drag a lot of stuff out where it feels like it's really unnecessary and just kind of filling time. Let me see if I can show you this little sequence here too, because what you'll see is Sabine and Ahsoka are supposed to be going to get the map so they can't go find Thrawn, even if that means Sabine can't find Ezra. So Shin and Merrick are sent to stop them. So they're going to have their little 2-on-2 duel, which is fine. But like when they show up, Sabine and Ahsoka should just attack. And instead we get this really drawn out, like Western style stare down. They take off the cloaks and jump off the rock and look at each other, and then they do their poses and then they fight every time. I don't know who this actress is that plays Shin. I forgot her name. But they either are not letting her make other expressions or she just has none, because she has like 2 expressions for every scene. Understand why all of these characters just seem so lifeless. And you can see what I'm talking about. Like, just look how long they're just staring at each other and staring, and then you get this line going somewhere completely unnecessary. Just fight. So they fight. Sabine gets knocked into a tree, and then she starts fighting with a lightsaber. Ahsoka kills Merrick, who people thought was going to be somebody important, and it kind of seems like he was some sort of Force ghost or something being possessed by the Force Witch. I don't really understand what this was, but he's dead. Ahsoka used the same move that she used in the Rebels cartoon repeatedly, where they use the spinning blade and she just sticks her lightsaber right in the middle of it and kills them. I don't like the spinning blades. I thought it looked cool when the first Grand Inquisitor, you saw his, because it seemed like he was really dynamic with it. But now it just seems like they spin a lot to look cool. And really, they could just use a double-bladed saber, and it'd probably be better, because you wouldn't have a big hole in the middle of the target. So Ahsoka runs off to go fight Baylan, which is really stupid because she could just help Sabine finish off Shin, and then they could go fight 2-on-1, but that's not what happens. So eventually, Shin and Sabine's fight is even enough that Shin uses like a little smoke bomb and just runs off to help Baylan. And I just don't understand how you can have non-Force users fighting Force users in Star Wars. Because it's not even just that they can use Force push and Force pull and blah, blah, blah. There's also the whole premonition aspect of it, where you can predict where they're going to swing, and regular people can't do that. So they can react and act way faster than anybody they're fighting against. It just makes no sense to me. But they keep trying to insist on it, so whatever. So Ahsoka and Baylan are fighting. Baylan's trying to protect this orb, and Ahsoka's trying to get to it to destroy it. And she grabs it with her hand. And again, I don't know why she can't use the Force, or why she grabbed it with her hand so she could get burnt instead of just cutting it in half. Because we see Baylan later on destroy it with his lightsaber, so they can clearly do it. But Baylan uses this because now Ahsoka has a hurt hand. And Ahsoka also thinks that Sabine is dead because Shin ran off and she shows up. So she flings Shin into like a pole or whatever around the structure. Shin's knocked out. Sabine shows up a few seconds later, and Ahsoka's on the edge of this cliff, and Baylan says, you know, give him the orb or whatever. And Ahsoka's like, destroy it. Don't let him do it. And Baylan calls her bluff and knocks her off the cliff. And then he talks Sabine into handing over the orb so that she can find Ezra. Otherwise, she's going to be all alone. So he calls her bluff and talks her into giving him the orb and says that she won't be hurt and she can go with them to find Ezra. So she does it. And, you know, we're supposed to see the difference between Ahsoka, who would have done it, and Sabine, who won't do it. But Ahsoka also had a lightsaber in her hand and chose to grab it barehanded. So make of that what you will. Shin tries to attack Sabine when she regains consciousness, and Baylan says, no, I gave her my word. So they take Sabine aboard, or the big special starship that can go into another galaxy. So we see Hera and her little squad of 6 fighters arrive, and the main lady says, ignore them, go into hyperspace anyway. And Jason, when they get there, because he's Force sensitive, says, Mom, I have a bad feeling about this. Obviously, Kanan is his dad, so he's probably a Force user too. Sometimes genes matter, I guess, and sometimes they don't, if Sabine can use the Force suddenly, which I'm still anticipating. They hyperspace jump through them in their big hyperspace ring, and Hera and like one other guy live and get kind of just spread out but not killed. So I don't know how that falls in line with The Last Jedi, but that aspect never made sense anyway, so I guess who cares. So Ahsoka fell off that cliff. We don't know what happened to her, if she's in the water, is she in some kind of Force-protected coma. She's not dying because Dave Filoni is never going to kill her. So she wakes up in the world between worlds, which if you haven't seen Rebels, you're probably going to be completely lost. In Rebels, the world between worlds is essentially an area that's like kind of a nexus to a bunch of certain events in Star Wars. And you can go through these portals in different times and change time. Like we've seen Ezra do it at the end of Rebels. He saves Ahsoka when she should have been killed by Darth Vader. But then there's another one that he can't change, which is when Kanan sacrificed himself for all of them in Rebels. Because if he had removed him, they all would have died. It's a weird time travel singularity type place. We don't really know what's going on here. But this is the ending that everybody wanted and the cameo that everyone was looking for. I don't have the subtitles, but you can see she's being called Snips really quietly if you have it with the subtitles on. When we get de-aged Hayden Christensen, and it kind of plays like happy music and then changes into his Darth Vader theme a little bit right at the end credits. So obviously Hayden Christensen showing up means that everyone thinks this is a 10 out of 10. Dave Filoni is the savior of Star Wars. I'll be honest, I have no clue what's going to happen next episode. I'm either guessing that he's going to kind of reconcile with her and she's going to wake up and pursue Sabine and all that, or it's going to be some kind of weird trick and she's going to realize that she can't change the past or something. But there's pretty much endless possibilities because the world between worlds is really unexplored, at least in Rebels. Maybe it's explored elsewhere. I don't know. For me, it's just not enough to say that this is some masterpiece episode. Like, there's definitely the best action has been in this one. This one required the least amount of dialogue and acting, so that negative was kind of removed from this episode. Obviously, I like seeing Hayden Christensen, but I don't think you can just call this a masterpiece because they can do cameos over and over. And to me, this is kind of the Dave Filoni special, is bring in characters that everyone loved from Clone Wars and Rebels, put them in live action, and then everyone praises it, even though a lot of the writing is terrible. There's this whole Dave Filoni is going to fix Star Wars thing. It's kind of ongoing. I'm just going to say it's not going to happen. He's not the guy that's going to fix Star Wars. Like, cameos can only get you so far. And the reality is, this entire show, if you're not a fan of Clone Wars or Rebels, then you're probably not going to know what's going on in the show. Like, if you haven't read the books or watched Rebels, you don't care who Thrawn is. You just know he's supposed to be some bad guy general. Like, you don't understand the nuances of Sabine and Ezra and Hera and Ahsoka's relationship during the rebellion, because they kind of loosely reference it, but it's just a couple lines of exposition here and there. And if you want Star Wars to come back to what it was, then you need the normies on board. And right now, nothing that's happening is good enough to get the normies interested. I would wager that anybody who watched this first episode of Ahsoka thought Sabine's entrance was cringy. They think all the characters seem lifeless and boring. The plot seems kind of dull and like we've done it a million times. All the lightsaber fights kind of have similar feels to them. Now, this one actually did improve on that. Ahsoka doing different things with her lightsaber. Sabine kind of using her Mandalorian equipment blended with her lightsaber. Baylan, you could tell, was kind of overwhelming Ahsoka physically with his. So they actually did a little bit more in this episode. But overall, it just feels like the same stuff over and over again. And I just don't think that Dave Filoni is the guy to fix it. I mean, to me, if you want to fix it, they need to make another movie and not continue these Disney Plus series. And they need to make a good one. I mean, really, they should probably retcon the sequels, but that's not going to happen. So what they really need to do is probably go 10,000 years before this story and just make a really good Star Wars movie to get people back and invested. Because, like, yeah, it's cool seeing Hayden Christensen. I like seeing him. And my opinion on the Clone Wars was it was very hit and miss. The first couple seasons I was kind of on. The stuff with Darth Maul and Savage Opress I liked. Season 7 was okay. Rebels I liked more than most people. Definitely liked seasons 3 and 4 more than 1 and 2. But again, you're talking about a fraction of the audience that you need for Star Wars to be relevant. Only a fraction is watching Rebels and Clone Wars. They have a very good hardcore fan base, and right now it kind of seems like that's all that's left. When you see the feedback online, and the feedback is just, oh my god, Anakin's back again. And they also used this trick in Obi-Wan like a year ago. So I don't know how long this is going to play with people. For me, this is not the type of stuff that is going to bring Star Wars back, even if I like to see it. So that's it for this one. It was definitely the best episode so far. It was good, not great. I'm not expecting much from the last two, but I guess we'll see. We'll probably end on a cliffhanger with Thrawn and Ezra, I'm assuming. All right, that's it for me on this one. Thanks. See ya.